The Exorcist.
The Exorcist is a 1973 horror film directed by William Friedkin, starring the iconic Linda Blair, Ellen Burstyn, and Jason Miller. The Exorcist is not only my favorite horror film of all time, it's one of my favorite movies of all time. Since its 1973 release, The Exorcist has been hailed to be the scariest film ever made. So when I saw the film at 12 years old, I had these expectations in my head because this is what I've heard my entire life, like, oh, it's the scariest movie ever. And so I went into it with those expectations pretty high, so I was like, this is definitely just overhyped, this is definitely not going to be scary at all. And I was wrong. I was really wrong. For those of you who haven't seen the movie, the film follows a young girl named Reagan who gets possessed by a demon, and then her mother enlists the help of two Catholic priests to come and save her life. What I just told you is the bare bones plot synopsis of the movie, but there's so many deeper things that go on in this film. Themes of crisis of faith, good versus evil, and that's really noticeable with Jason Miller's character, Father Karras. Jason Miller especially, he is the highlight of the film for sure. You would think that he's like the main character, but honestly, he's just the side character. And he gives such a subdued, realistic, and captivating performance as Father Karras. Everyone gives a realistic performance in this, especially Ellen Burstyn. She gives a very haunting performance as Reagan's mom, Chris. Friedkin shot this film almost like a documentary. It's very cinematic looking, don't get me wrong, but I'm just saying it's documentary-like in the way that it feels like we're almost like a fly on the wall for most of the scenes. Like, especially the scenes where Father Karras is by himself, or just walking up into his mom's apartment, or just walking, around the city, or, running on the track. So many of these scenes feels like, we're just an observer. And I think that's the best way to do this film. That's what makes it so unnerving to me, especially without the music most of the time. So we can't talk about the movie without, of course, talking about Linda Blair's performance. She had to put herself in very physical situations, especially during the bed scene where she's flopping up and down. Apparently she really hurt her back or her neck. So it just goes to show that, even as a young actor, she was excellent in the film, and that is something that is hard to do, especially people like to talk about child actors not being great in films, but her performance just stands the test of time and has become one of the most iconic things about this movie. I want to talk about the impact this movie has had on pop culture and just cinema in general. So when this movie was first released, people were running out of the theater puking. They were running out saying it ruined their life. It made them question things that they never had to question before. That kind of visceral response, it's the kind of things that a filmmaker would love to hear about their film. I feel like The Exorcist is an experience. The Exorcist actually feels too intense for most people to actually watch and experience. That's why the film has stood the test of time. Even in 2024, this film still holds up. I think a lot of that goes towards the ability for Friedkin to create this mise-en-scène. The atmosphere, it just absolutely suffocates you and never lets go until the end of the movie. The Exorcist has actually spawned multiple demonic possession movies afterwards, years and years after. It spawned an entire subgenre of horror. So in a way, it's a first of its kind. What other demonic possession movies that came out years after didn't do was capture the same level of intimacy that The Exorcist does. And I think that's because The Exorcist just comes off as so much more compelling because of that intimacy that we feel with these characters, especially Jason Miller. Possession stuff only actually takes a little chunk of the movie. It's not even the whole focus, which is what people always think of when they think of The Exorcist. They think of vomiting green stuff and peeing on the floor and head spinning. It's not what it's about. What it's about is Father Karras' crisis of faith. And I want to really talk about that dream sequence that he has, because we see Father Karras and we see his mother, and she's walking up from the subway, There's no sound in the scene, which makes it even more terrifying. Father Karras is chasing after his mother. She's yelling, "Dimmy, Dimmy." You see her mouthing the words, but I think I said it right. It cuts to like a flash of a demon's face, which has become iconic in the movie as well. And then she starts walking down the stairs, descending. This has become one of the most memorable parts of this movie for me, because it is so haunting when you really think about it. It's the lack of sound, the creepy imagery, the underlying metaphors here. His mother is descending into hell, and he can do nothing to save her. You could tell this is sending him over the edge emotionally. And Father Karras, you could tell from the beginning of the movie, he's lost his faith even before his mother passed away. So you could only imagine what he was like afterwards. So what I think this movie is truly about is redemption. It's about figuring out the flaws in yourself. It's about being okay with those flaws and moving on. You could look on Father Karras' face and you could see that he's not a happy man. You could tell that he's got his own demons inside that he's trying to get rid of. Honestly, there's so many scenes in this movie that I could talk about that are so iconic, but the scariest to me, besides that dream sequence, when Regan is stabbing herself with the crucifix, her head spinning, it's not really about the act, it's about what she says in that scene. And also, when I first saw the movie, I was 12 years old, right? First time ever watching it, I watched the director's cut. At the scene where Regan is spider crawling down the stairs backwards, I had to shut the movie off. I could not do it. I was like, I'm done. Nope, I gotta watch something happy now and cleanse my mind of all the demonic shit. Friedkin's direction has also gone down as Hollywood legend for this film. He was putting a lot of the actors, especially the priests in this movie, in very cold temperatures, like sub 25 degree temperatures, to keep the bedroom cold, to see the breath coming out of their mouth. And things like that just really adds to the movie. It adds to the seriousness he took, the subject matter, and it makes you feel like he wasn't treating this like a horror film. Like, it wasn't some schlocky oh, whoa, boo. This is a drama. I love the fact that for most of the movie, it's not really any sound, especially in like dialogue scenes. There's no music involved. It's just sounds in the background and then dialogue, which makes scenes like Father Karras running on the track and then he talks to the detective afterwards. It makes scenes like that feel so unnerving. It makes the whole movie feel unnerving. It feels like there's a looming sense of doom and dread. I will say, when the iconic Tubular Bells theme kicks on, it just sends chills down my spine every single time. I also like the way they contrast in the film with good versus evil. They have the good guys, the priests, wearing black, and they have the villain of the film wearing white. And I'm not just talking about Regan, I'm talking about like Father Karras' mom. Multiple times in the movie she is wearing the white robe, especially like in the hospital when she's like, Demi, why you do this to me, Demi? It makes you feel like the demon is looming behind the scenes and nobody's safe. Of course, the third act has become the most quoted part of the entire movie. It's what people remember. It's what people think of when they think of The Exorcist. They think of the power of Christ compels you. They think of that. They think of her levitating out of the bed, the head spinning. That third act is incredibly intense because the second and first act did so well and such a good job of ramping the film up to those heights. Sometimes in a lot of third acts, for especially horror movies and exorcism movies, the exorcism at the end just doesn't hit the same, Not the way this does, because you need not only a solid third act, you need a solid first and second act to accompany. So what I love in the third act, besides seeing Father Merrin and Father Karras working together, we see Father Karras downstairs taking a break. And he's sitting there, kind of slumped over. Chris, Regan's mom, comes in and she asks him, "Is my daughter going to die?" And what I love here is that he almost flips a switch. He's looking at the ground and he looks up, he stares at her, and he says, "No." This scene where you see him regain his faith and realize why he took the priesthood in the first place, just is so satisfying to watch. He realizes that he regains the power to overcome and triumph over evil. The way Jason Miller can just display all these emotions and feelings without having to say a word is why I love this scene so much. Father Karras comes in, sees that he's dead on the bed, and the showdown begins with him alone and then the demon Pazuzu. And Father Karras has to make the ultimate sacrifice to save Regan's soul, and in doing so, he allows the demon to come in himself. He jumps out the window, killing himself. And this ending, you know, it's so weird because the ending's not weird, but it leaves you with a feeling like it's a happy ending because Regan is okay and she goes back to normal. She's fine. She forgets everything that happened. She doesn't even remember. But at the same time, I am thinking about, like, what happens to Father Karras, though? You know, he's dead now. What happens to his soul in the afterlife? These are questions that are kind of explained in Exorcist 3. They're kind of further explored, at least. But what I would love, especially since Universal Studios has the rights to The Exorcist and they have plans for future movies, I think they should either do like a prequel for Father Karras' origin story, or they should explore what happened right after this movie takes place with his character. Like, where is he? I know it'd be hard because they can't really get Jason Miller back. That's just something that's always been on my mind whenever I watch the movie. Because what I would love to know is, does the demon still have control of him? Or is his soul finally at peace with his mother up in heaven? I guess it's supposed to be kind of an ambiguous ending, kind of leave it up for you to interpret, but I don't know, I just want the answers, you know, I'm just kind of like that. You know, I have to recommend The Exorcist. Go watch it if you haven't, if you're a horror fan especially, but if you're just a movie lover, go watch it, please. This is something that needs to be studied, especially if you want to go into filmmaking. I'm going to give the movie 5 out of 5 stars. Thank you guys again for watching, and stay tuned for the next episode of 31 Days of Horror.